Mytech U webinar education series. Today we're going to be talking about the world's most powerful mid-range storage system presented by IBM. Louis Galland is an IBM storage specialist, is our guest speaker and subject matter expert. He'll be guiding us over the next 30 minutes through the new improvements and evolution that IBM has put into this storage solution, and how we're very excited about its ability to help organizations go between migrations. When you have an existing storage solution in place, you need to migrate to a new one, or and just the power and the efficiency and tool sets that it brings to the table that is different than anything that's out there today. So with that said, Louis, thank you very much for being here, and looking forward to the presentation, and I'll hand everything over to you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. As Nate said, my name is Louis Galland. I'm with IBM. I'm actually located in the Minneapolis area, so if necessary, I can always come out to any of your locations and go through the same presentation if you request from Nathan, okay? We're going to talk about, storage efficiency, and discuss a new product called the Storvize B7000 that was announced a year ago. So first thing I want to do is just talk about what everybody, the customer environments everybody's having to struggle with over the last couple of years. What you've got is content which is doubling every 18 to 24 months. And even though you've got this, I'll call it exponential curve of content that's growing, the budgets that, our customers have is really pretty much flat. They're not getting the amount of money that equates to how fast the content's growing. So what IBM's done is gone out and said, let's look at the best practices and the technologies and try to help our customers address this problem of exponential growth of content at the same time flat growth on our budgets. So we've gone and looked and came up with really 3 initiatives that we're working to provide our customers technology and best practices to help solve this problem. And it really breaks down into 3 things. The first one is stop storing so much data. Now that doesn't mean you can throw the data away, because we actually have to store more data and we have to store it longer. But we're using 2 technologies in this area, data compression and data deduplication, to actually take this data that, as you can see on the left, is in a larger block, and how do we shrink it so that it takes less space, okay? And we've gone out and bought 2 companies in this area of data compression and data deduplication. So look for, a lot of emphasis in the months to come on these 2 types of technology, and we have some solutions, appliance solutions in this area right now, but look for these 2 types of technologies to really move more into, I'll call it, everyday storage arrays. The second initiative is move data to the right place. Here we're basically saying, storage can be placed on multiple storage media, all the way from, solid state device to high performance spinning drives to high capacity spinning drives to tape. So what we focus on here is tiering and making the system automated so that it moves the data to the right place so that you can lower your cost and increase your capacity. And then the last initiative is storing more with what's on the floor. And we're going to talk about storage virtualization, where, in the past you've had storage silos, direct attached storage. What we're talking about here is how do I, create a storage shared pool of not just, my IBM stuff, but can I virtualize, other, products that are on the floor that I've already invested in, make it part of the shared pool, and that's what we're going to talk about in terms of storage virtualization. So it really comes down to it, how do we help, basically reduce the risk, reduce the cost, and reduce the complexity, and create storage efficiencies going forward. Okay, next chart. Okay, so this is the Storvize B7000. It's a 2U form factor that even the controller, this is a picture of the controller contains 24 drives, or it could also contain 12 drives that are the 3.5 inch. So the intent here is that you can start small. It has very high performance, very ease of use to manage, and at the same time provides a lot of storage efficiencies in the areas of, I'll call it, features and functions to do things like migration and replication, then provisioning and all of that. We're going to talk more about that. Okay, so we announced this V7000 in October of last year. We started shipping in the middle of November. So inside of about 10 months, 9 months, we have shipped over 4,500 systems worldwide with over 2,500 customers. You know, this equates to hundreds of petabytes of capacity, and so far we're delivering 5.9 data availability. So this has been one of the fastest product ramp-ups in IBM storage history. Now, what we've announced as of last month is on top of the Storwize V7000, we have announced unified storage. So what does that mean? So if you look at the picture here, it's still the V7000 storage, but along with that, we are announcing, that we will provide 2 filers. They're X Series 3550 M3s that you can basically implement with the Storwize V7000, and you can now handle block as well as file storage. Okay, and that will be shipping as of the end of this month, starting next week. All right, so what is unified storage? Well, if you look at your content, you have block applications, which are, your MS Exchange, Domino, your OLTPs, but you also are dealing with the file, the digital media, imaging, like on your PAC systems, content management. So what we're trying to do with unified storage is say you can have one storage array that can handle not just block, but also handle your file type of data. So that's what unified storage is. And that's what the V7000 Unified is delivering on. So let's take a look at it. A year ago we delivered the V7000, and we delivered the top 3, being able to provide virtualization through our SVC, which, IBM has been, selling since 2003, almost 10 years. We've got 25,000 installed. So we've taken SVC, our storage virtualization, and we've put all of that code into the control unit of the V7000. We've taken the innovative GUI that was available on XIV, and we've also found that the customers really love that Web 2.0 ease of use GUI to manage their storage. So we've taken the GUI and we've also added that to the V7000, and we've taken Easy Tier, which is our solid state implementation on the DS8000. Again, enterprise type technology that we've taken off of our DS8000, which has been out there for 3 years, and we put that in the V7000. So that's what was delivered a year ago. As of last month, we've also delivered on, the 3 bottom things, which are the Active Cloud Engine, which allows you in a file type of basis to identify when the data is created, how you want it managed, where do you want it placed on the file creation, what do you want to do with it after 30 days or 6 months or a year, and it automates with policies how you can move your data around and manage the life cycle of the content. Clustering systems, when we announced the V7000 a year ago, you could have one V7000. In May, we announced that you could cluster 2 of them, and then as of last month, we've now announced that you can cluster 4 V7000s into a clustered environment managed by one GUI interface. And then the file support, which we've already talked about, and we'll discuss some more. So here's what the V7000, looks like. Again, it's a 2U form factor. It is an active-active dual controller. You can have up to 9 expansions behind the controller. So you've got, in essence, 10, shelves that contain storage. We support both the 3.5-inch drives as well as the 2.5-inch drives. And the reason for that is the 3.5 right now is really driving the high capacity. The 2.5 is driving the, I'll call it, high performance. You have in the V7000, you can mix and match both the nearline SAS, the SAS, and the solid state drives. So you don't have to have a shelf for each of the different types of drives. You can intermix them in the same shelf. It comes with 8 gig fiber channel ports, 4 per controller. It comes with 1 gig iSCSI, 2 per controller, and then we also announced in May and support 10 gig iSCSI connections for the 2 different controllers. Okay. It comes with a lot of software functions, that we're going to talk about, things like Metro and Global mirroring, thin provisioning. You can do flash copy, up to 256 copies per volume. It has RAID capabilities of 0, 1, 5, 6, and 10. And we're going to talk about Easy Tier, which is our solid state implementation. This is a completely redundant box. All of the components in this are, hot swappable and redundant. It comes with 2 power supplies, 2 fans, everything's redundant and it's hot swappable. Again, we deliver a 5 nines availability with this, storage array. And it has a lot of VM storage VPIs, including VAAI. Going to the next chart. Okay, I talked about on the clustering. So, like I said, initially we had one V7000, and then in May we announced that you could cluster 2, and then as of last month, again, we've announced that you can cluster 3 and upwards of 4. So this box, from an entry level on the left, can grow to 4 clustered V7000s with up to, 9 times 4, 36 expansion shelves that, if you use the small form factors, can have 960 drives, of which, that's almost a terabyte of data with a 1 terabyte drive. And then on top of that, you could use the long form factor, large form factor, which is 3.5-inch drives. You can get up to 480 a drive. With the 3 terabytes, that's almost 1.5, petabytes of data. Okay.
And Louis, let me interject on this one. This is a common area where folks get a little confused. I just want to make sure that we're clarifying. Because there's a question here that came in from an attendee, as well as when I've heard these before, talking about the V7000, is that when you're talking about the clustering of the storage, it's, so we're not saying we can only add 4 boxes, but we can add, each unit itself can add up to, as you mentioned on the previous slide, up to 9 additional storage enclosures.
Yep.
So there's a total of 36 total enclosures times 24 disks each that could be clustered together, right?
Yep, and in fact, counting the controllers, because controllers can have 24 in them also, so you've got 10 shelves.
10 shelves, yep.
Sort of a 9 plus 1, right? So that's 10 times 4, that's 40 times 24 drives if you're using the small form factors, or 40 times 12 using the large form factor.
Yeah.
So if you look at the picture on the bottom, that's an 8-way clustered, 4 fully populated V7000s on that bottom right corner. That's how big this grows.
Fantastic. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so the point here is that it's classified as a mid-range storage, but if you look at it, it goes from 1 shelf all the way up to 40 shelves with 4 controller units, with each being a dual active acting controller. This thing can basically start small and scale very, very high. Okay. We're talking about data migration. So in this picture, what it's really showing you that you can take the V7000 and place it, behind the host and virtualize, those 3 boxes that could be either IBM or non-IBM. And then what you're able to do is you're able to migrate, the V7000 sort of manages the whole storage array through its virtualization. You can migrate data from any of the other boxes to the V7000, or any of the other boxes to another box. And the V7000 allows you to do all of that through its GUI by just pointing and clicking and moving data from any of the storage units either into the V7000 or out to any of the externally virtualized. And that you can do with no impact to the application, and you don't even have to take the application down and migrate data.
Again, this is a big point, and there hasn't been questions from the audience on this one, but I know that this is, I had a customer this year that went through migration from an existing, they went from an EMC unit to another EMC unit, and it took months to do the migration, and it was extremely painful for them. And so you're talking about, this isn't just taking a V7000 in front of an IBM, existing IBM storage. It can be any storage that's out there.
Absolutely. Yep, and we've had customers say, we're going to buy the V7000 just to do migration because it simplifies the migration from, say, a 1 EMC box to another EMC box. Or, you can bring it in, you can virtualize it, use it, and you can migrate it, whether it's the first, I'll call it, 30 days or at the end of a year, you can just with a point and click migrate data from, like I said, an HP to an EMC, an EMC 120 to an EMC 480, or, move it from, an IBM or an HP into the V7000. Once the software and the maintenance numbers, start to increase, you can quickly migrate your data and, take some of the old technology off the floor if you choose to do that. So the migration is very simple and like you said, very useful and time savings, for various environments.
So, and you just mentioned something that I feel is very another important point. So this isn't just to, let's say if they're looking to replace their existing storage, if they're looking to, keep their existing storage, but they just need to add on to it. This is an opportunity potentially to have, you could bring in the V7000, and it not only would interoperate with your existing platform in a production environment, but then when you are ready to replace that other unit, you could actually then that would facilitate the migration. So it's not a rip and you don't have to rip and replace. You can actually have interoperability between the two in production.
Yep. In fact, one of the things that I like is, say you have a customer who's got 50 terabytes on the floor, and they want to add capacity, and they need to add another 50 terabytes of data. Well, they don't have to do a rip and replace and buy 100 terabytes. They can actually bring in a V7000 with 50 terabytes, virtualize what's on the floor, and they have a storage array that has 100 terabytes. So they're buying only the incremental capacity that they need, not the total capacity, trying to replace what's on the floor. So, from a budgeting point of view, from a cost point of view, this really is very convenient. It's like I said, you can add capacity to your existing storage, and then virtualize it and make it all look and managed as one.
And that's one of the things I feel that, I'm just on that point alone, seeing how budgets happen where you buy something today and you expect it to last 4 to 5 years, and 2 years down the road you run into its capacity and you don't want to throw it away. It's got at least a couple years of viable life left in it, and that's where you don't have to throw away all those dollars you already invested.
Yep, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, how when you
Perfect.
Put the V7000 in front of it, all of the technology that's in the V7000 overlays on top of the older technology and even improves that, okay? And, in the second bullet here it says, say you've got old storage out there, whether it's an HP or an IBM or an EMC, and it doesn't have thin provisioning. You can actually take and create a thin provision, migrate that data into the thin provision, and reclaim space from the old boxes that has been locked up and reserved. So you can reclaim that space, okay? All right, let's move on to the next slide. Data protection. So, what we're able to do also with the V7000 and provided as a part of the software is flash copy. So you can take snapshots, point-in-time flash, snapshots of your data, and this is a very space efficient because what it's doing is it's saving the pointers, so that it can always go back and recover. It only writes the new data, and then with the pointers, it can always recover its old data and basically store in minutes. Okay, but if you want, you also have the option of creating clones, which is a duplicate copy of all of the data. Okay, and then we also have replication to provide both metro and global mirroring. So if you wanted to replicate to an off-site or another location, either in town or on the campus or in another state, you can use our metro and global mirroring replication capability to create DR, disaster recovery sites. And very efficiently and very simply. We have a couple of options. Our software really comes as a part of the complete license. You don't have to, I'll call it nickel and dime. You want flash copy, you want migration, it's just one license. But we do have two optional. One we just talked about, which is the Metro and Global Mirror. When you buy the replication, you get both Metro and Global Mirror. So it comes with the replication, both capabilities. But we also have, along with Flash Copy, we have a product called Flash Copy Manager. And what this allows you to do is it runs on the server, and it allows you to back up your data at the application layer, not at the storage level. So if you're running an Oracle database or a SQL database or a mail, a Microsoft Mail Exchange server, you can replicate, you can first of all back it up and then quickly back up that application. Okay, so if you had the mail the Microsoft Exchange server, if you wanted to back up a mailbox or even just an email that was deleted, very simple to do, just by using Flash Copy Manager. And this is a very, these two products are relatively inexpensive. Flash Copy Manager is like $800 list. With a 50% discount, you're talking $400 per terabyte, which, is very simple and also very economically affordable. One of the things that I talked about is on the graphical user interface that we've taken from our XIV product and moved into the B7000. So it's a Web 2.0 GUI that allows you to do point and click. It has a lot of templates. It's very simple to manage the system, and when you're cluster, you can actually manage the force system. So when you first boot the box, it does an auto discovery, identifies what drives and arrays are out there. It comes back, creates managed pools, allows you to create managed disks, allows you to create pools and create LUNs. Let's just go to the next page, the next chart, and you'll see some more. So one of the things that we've done with the unified storage is that you're able to manage both the block and the unified, the file, all in the same GUI. Now, we're one of the first ones that are really, and like EMC, you have to have two different GUIs, one to manage your file, one to manage your block. What we've done is integrated it so that if you look at the top there, it's 48 internal drives with, the B7000, and you've got 2 external storage systems, so that's giving you 3 managed disks. You can create a pool. From there, they've created 12 volumes, and they've presented those to the host. But even then, it drops down. You can create 38 file volumes, 5-file systems. So as you can see, we're, from this GUI, able to manage, not only the block storage, but also the file system. If you look at the bottom, I mean, this is very intuitive, and you're allowed to, like, even click on Manage Disk. It'll give you an overview of what a managed disk is. You can click on, a video. It'll even come up and tell you what it is. You can go down to the Information Center, click on that. It'll go out and bring in more information from the Internet. So it's got a lot of capabilities to help you very simply, just work through and manage. So I'm only showing a couple of, displays. I mean, at any time we could come out and demo the whole GUI for you by doing, WebEx. It takes about 30 minutes to 45 minutes to really show you how to,
before you move on, if you go back to that slide really quick, if you wouldn't mind, one of the things I know is a concern is training, right? So especially when you're considering if these existing teams might have EMC systems in place or HP systems in place, or just you name it, Compellent, et cetera, that what you're part of the GUI, the interface and the training. It sounds like it's not requiring days and days of training, or to get your whole IT team up to speed on it. That it's relatively intuitive, so that training isn't that you want to be trained on it, but it's not a huge learning curve to take you from what you maybe accustomed to moving over to this solution.
You're absolutely right. The box can be set up in 30 minutes. Within 4 hours, you can have it installed, data migrated over, and it is very simple. The GUI really is very intuitive, and like I said, you can click on videos, you can click on information on the Internet. There's the templates that are set up, so if you go, you can scroll along the left, but you can also do a suggested task drop down. There are, all along the way, templates that, sort of help you and give you recommendations, on no matter what task you're doing. Okay?
Great, thank you.
As a part of the GUI, we also have a real-time performance monitoring system, which will allow you to, if you needed to do any type of, debug or something, say one of your database administrator or something comes to you and says, hey, we've got a little issue here, it looks like it's running a little slow. You're able to go in and look using the performance monitoring. It updates every 5 seconds, and it'll create up to 5 minutes worth where you can actually go in and look at the system utilization, look at the connections, on your interfaces and see how they're running, check out the capacity and your managed disk. So you have a real-time monitoring system that comes with the, the base software. We're going to talk about solid state implementation. If you notice on the right, it's identifying the red hotspots in the spinning drives at the bottom, and then it's moving that into the solid state. So you've got this continuous workload monitoring task that's going on in the controller to identify these hotspots. It's looking at the data over a 24-hour window, and it's identifying these hotspots and moving them into the solid state. So this isn't a manual or a utility type of process. This is an automated, tuning that takes the data and says this should be in solid state, and by moving it up into solid state off of the spinning drive, it basically improves the performance of your total storage array. And in this case, it's showing you that with as little as 2%, you can increase your performance, 3x, depending on, the data. So let's take a look.
This question that came in from the audience, maybe you're going to address this on this next slide, but explain, it's a question of trying to understand the data points you just mentioned on there, which is where does the 2% number come from, and I guess
I'm going to show you a chart here. I'm going to show you a chart in two charts. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
And that'll help answer that. Okay. So here's the chart. If you look at the bottom on the green line, it shows where your transactions are running about 2,000 IOPS per second by turning on Easy Tier, which again is your solid state implementation and tiering. You can see how it's learning as it's going along where the hotspots are, and it's moving those hotspots into the solid state. And here you can just show, you can see where it's taken the data and moved it from the black line up to the green line. And in this case, it's showing you a 3% increase in, its performance. So let's go to the next chart because that'll answer the question. I'm sorry, it didn't. I had taken that chart out because we only have 30 minutes. We have a stat tool that basically looks at your, it's a utility. It looks at your data, and it'll draw you a curve that says if you added solid state, 0%, 5%, 10%, and it shows you as you add solid state what you can expect for an improvement of the performance on your storage array. So that tool comes in very handy because depending on your data, it'll basically help you identify if I added more solid state, what would I expect for the performance improvement to be? And at some point in time, you reach a knee in the curve which says, call it 10% or 12% or 13%. It'll basically tell you there's no sense spending over 12 or 13% because you've reached the flat part of the curve where you don't get any more performance from investing in any more solid state. So we have that tool. It's available to use that helps you really look at it and determine how much solid state you want to invest in and what you can expect for performance increases.
So that investment is, so I think that did answer the question as far as just wondering where that 2%. So it sounds like that what you're talking about is there's kind of twofold savings. It's savings not only from if we're initially scoping the amount of solid state we should build into the array, as well as over time we can also evaluate the whether or not adding solid state would benefit the performance.
Yeah, the other thing that I will tell you in terms of IBM's implementation, the amount of data, the extent that you're moving from spinning drive into solid state. We default that size to 256 meg, and you can tune it all the way down to 16 meg. So the amount of data that we're moving up, again, is at the max 256 meg. And some of our competitors, they're moving up a gigabyte, into their solid state. So they're chewing up that solid state real estate, which is expensive, a lot faster than us because their extents are 1 gig, whereas our extents are like 256 meg. Okay, and again, with our tool, it really helps you to identify how much solid state you want to use and invest in, and what you would expect from a performance.
Great, thank you.
Improvement. Okay, all right. One of the things that we announced last month as a part of the V7000 was this Active Cloud Engine. Okay, what this allows you to do, especially in the file, not the block, but in the file, it's a policy-driven engine that when the data is created, you get to identify, where do you want the data positioned? Do you want it in the, in the high-performance drives? And then at a certain point in time, do you want to move that data? And how do you move the data? When do you want it to expire and be deleted? So that's what we call the Active Cloud Engine. And I've got a chart on the next one that just sort of shows an example. So you've got a file created, and you're going to keep that on your high performance, using the solid state and the SAS drive. At the end of 30 days, you're saying, I want this data to be migrated to my nearline SAS, which is sort of, it's high capacity. It's sort of like SATA drive. So you can move it from there at the end of 30 days. At the end of 60 days, you might say, I want that data moved to older technology. In this case, we've got an HP EVA that's been virtualized. So we've migrated it now at the end of 60 days to SATA. And then at the end of 80 days, you could say we want this to be deduped and to push it out to tape using our TSM, Tivoli Storage Manager. So the ACE, this active cloud engine allows you to help, I'll call it, create a migration path for your data so that it's automatically managed and doesn't have to be manually managed to help move data off of your high-performance, high-cost systems onto the lower-cost systems. Okay? So that's what the automatic or active cloud engine is, and that's new as of last month. Let's talk about the connectivity on the back end, which, from the controller down to the disk's expansion units. We use SAS connectivity, so it runs, each of these pair of wires runs at 6 gigabits per second. So if you, request data, it'll use pair 1. If you request data again, it'll use pair 1. But if you get a burst of requests going down to a expansion, you can actually use all 4 pairs of wire, and net effect is you'll get a 24 gigabits per second throughput down to those expansion shelves. Okay, so again, very high back-end throughput. So we've let's talk about storage virtualization now.
Just a quick time check. Louis, let me interject real quick just for the audience.
Okay.
That we have hit our 30 minutes, a little over our 30 minutes, but
okay.
Because we've kind of been doing some Q&A throughout the whole presentation, as opposed to saving it to the end, let's just continue the path, and we'll just continue to do the Q&A.
I've only got about a few more charts.
Yeah. So, and if we got some questions, feel free to interject them, and we'll continue the Q&A. So,
okay.
Just for the audience benefit, thank you.
All right. In this particular case, you got the V7000. It's showing the GUI front interface to manage it, and then below it, it's showing that you're virtualizing IBM, say a DS4000 or an HP EVA or an EMC box. So you're virtualizing those boxes. It becomes managed by the V7000. You can, manage it from the same GUI interface. All of the technology that we talked about, this thin provisioning, the easy tier, solid state implementation, the snapshots, the remote mirroring, all of that technology that comes with the V7000 is now layered on top of those virtualized storage arrays, and now make available and improve the performance of the existing storage arrays. Okay, the chart that I just threw up really shows you at the bottom. That's all of the storage. It's an example of all the storage that we can virtualize underneath the V7000, and then on top it's shows you all of the hosts that we can connect to. So this kind of gives you a good example of, in the center you've got a production system. We virtualize disk. We can, basically do a remote replication off to the right to another SAN at a different location. So this gives you sort of, a complete picture of what's capable with the V7000. Moving along. The box, we talked about the 8 gig fiber channels all the way through to the back-end SAS connectivity. I throw this chart up here just to give you a sort of a reference that says how well does this box perform. So we're one of the few companies that still publish our SVC1, SVC2 benchmarks. In this case, we started shipping the box in November. We published the benchmarks in January. They're independent, and in this case, it was using 120 drives internally and 80 drives externally to virtualize. We were able to achieve 56,000 IOPS using this system. So this gives you a comparison of what we'll call the capability of the V7000. I tend to think of it as it's the performance of a DS5300 at about the price of a 5020. That's kind of what this chart's trying to show you. All right, that's really the end of it. It's a modular design. Again, you can grow either horizontally or vertically. You can grow it with the controllers or expansion units. Very high, advanced storage feature function capabilities, and a GUI interface to help you management. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, so that's the end.
All right, thanks.
Dave,
so
I'll turn it back to you for any questions.
Great, thanks, Louis. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for going through that. And I know we ran a little bit over the actual webinar, the 30-minute window, but that's okay. We had some good questions that were coming up in the interim. So I did get a couple questions here. One, I/O seems to be a significant challenge, and it sounds like this is one of the last couple slides you did here. I know that organizations that might have an existing virtual infrastructure, and then they want to do something like virtual desktop environments or Citrix, Zen App or Zen Desktop, like VMware View, et cetera. And I/O seems to be a problem. What's the help understand? Can you elaborate a little bit on what are the things that the V7000 is doing that's different from existing storage solutions that enables you to get the I/O that you talked about in the last couple slides there?
Okay, well, first of all, we get the I/O because you have cache. You have 16 gig of cache on top of it. You have the solid state, which is almost like a second level cache that you can put into it, and with the automated, hotspot, it moves the hotspots into the solid state. So you've got a lot of, I'll call it, technologies that are working with it. But you talked about, like with the VDI, we have a lot of plug-in types of things with the VAI, so that it doesn't have to, when it's creating the desktops, the virtual desktops, it doesn't have to keep going back out and reading every one to create them. So there's plugins to create more efficiencies using things like the VDI. So.
Gotcha. So as a follow-up to that, let's say you've got, in your scenario of being able to cluster controllers, how would you gauge, if you're running in against the upper I/O limitations of a single unit, is the answer to, I guess, what are the answers? Is it potentially to add another storage enclosure to get some additional performance of the disks of the additional drives themselves, or is it to add another V7000 head-end unit controller? And how do you know to draw those lines and figure out what the to make sure you get the IOPS for your required?
First of all, we do have some utilities called like Disk Magic, where we can simulate your environment and look at the performance of a configuration. Okay. The other thing that you can do is using this real-time monitoring system. You can look at the throughput of your interfaces. So you can say, look, what's the interface of my controller look like? Is my bottleneck at the controller, or is my bottleneck at the drive level? So if you have a bottleneck at the controller, you could add controller and cluster it and create, sort of spread your data across 4 controllers, or because each controller is the dual controller. So you could add controllers, and I'll call it, if your bottleneck is at the control unit. If it's at the drive, in the hotspots, you could turn around and add solid state to, I'll call it, eliminate some of the hotspots, or you could add more drives that would then give more spindles to allow you to do more striping and spread it across multiple drives to do, sort of a striping, so when you read it, you get more of a parallel read. So using a real-time monitoring system, I think you can begin to help identify where the bottlenecks might be, and whether it's performance or capacity. You have a lot of things that you can do. If you notice, there's no model here. It isn't, a 120, 240, 480. It's one box that you can scale up or scale out depending on the needs and what I'll call your pain points.
So, and that sounds good, because I tell you, one of the things I think is a frustration, it sounds like so IBM not only in rolling out the V7000, they've also developed the tools that enable you to make proper decisions about, like you said, understanding where those bottlenecks are. So you're not just, it's not like an IT guy or a consultant saying, hey, I think you need another controller. We can actually analyze the data and model where your pain points really are to make the proper investment.
Yep, it's like before you invest in solid state, you could run the stat tool and look at what's my data look like, and if I added solid state, how would that improve the performance of my system?
Fantastic. No, that's great information. So one other question here I did get from the audience, and I think this you might have addressed this on one of the slide or two before this particular slide that you're showing, which is, I know that you have the ability to do the mirror between locations.
Yep.
The global mirror, the metro mirror, I think is what that's called. But what about if you have multiple locations with multiple infrastructure? So it's not that you have one location with all your infrastructure and you're just replicating to another, but if you have, let's say, 1, 2, or 2 or 3 or 4 individual locations that have individual infrastructure for the respective location, is there interoperability between, from a GUI interface, so you can see the whole system, or is it siloed or isolated? I think that's what the question is.
Right now you can do replication from V7 to V7000 to a V7000. Underneath the V7000s, you could virtualize, I'll call it, your other infrastructure. But right now it's kind of like, so say you have an HP or an EMC or an IBM, you would virtualize. You have to have 2 V7000s, one at each location to do the replication. The other option you have right now is SVC. So if you had, a data center that's running SVC, you could, in a remote location, have a V7000 and you could replicate to that, between.
So, okay, so let's so replication, I think, was part of the question. but I believe it was also, I'm thinking from a management perspective. So if I'm an IT staff, and let's say I'm based in location A,
Yep.
and then I've got infrastructure in location B and location C, what's the best way for me as an IT team or staff to manage all of those, say, three environments?
Right now, the GUI that we have will manage the V7000 or the clustered V7000. If you want to manage across multiple sites, we have a product called the Tivoli Productivity Center, TPC, and you can order that with the V7000, and that will allow you to manage your whole SAN network. Okay.
And now,
multiple locations. So that's an extra. That would be a different piece of software that would give you that capability.
But you have the but it is there if that's something you wish. I mean, you could log into those other systems individually, which would be fine too. But if you wanted to have kind of a total, parent-child kind of overarching view of everything, you would just have that extra piece of
it's a URL. So you basically just from your laptop, you could sign into 2 different URLs and basically look at the different sites. Okay. But
so
if you wanted
still
to manage
ease of management there.
But if you wanted to manage it from one screen, you'd have to look at either TPC or System Director, which are other products that we have.
Okay, very good. And the last little question, I think we have probably another minute or two to be able to answer. Is one of the actually this came from I was kind of holding on to this from the beginning, which is you mentioned flat budgets and doubling storage every 18 months. So is that statistic pretty? I mean, where's that statistic come from? Is actually the question. I think it was the doubling the storage every 18 months. So is that industry-wide? Is that pretty much what's happening out there? Or
pretty much all industries.
Where did that study data come from?
The board. Yeah. Well, first of all, it came from some research that was done, some studies that were done. Okay, and this study was done a couple of years ago. But if you look at the content right now out there, it's like it's coming from. Look at how many cell phones are out there right now. The emails, that people are sending the distribution list with 20, meg files attached to them. The audio and the video files that are, and things like all the photos, all the PAC systems. I mean, everything's being digitized now. You don't have, X-ray systems like we had before. It's just that the unstructured data is growing, and it's a lot different than the structured data that we've really dealt with in the past. So, I mean, they're talking about, there's statistics that show that there's more data being created in the last year than, represents from the last, 100 years or something. So those are studies that are already out there, across the board, all industries.
So that's where, so I get that's where, again, that was the strategy of the V7000 was addressed some of that stuff. I guess I wanted to just there was so that question came about. And then the last question, I think we got time for one more, is you mentioned there's 5 nines of availability. How does that compare to other systems that are out there, and where did you why is IBM making the claim of 5 nines of availability? I guess elaborate on that a little bit.
The claims of 5 9 availability are what we're seeing in our systems. The intent here is what we're trying to really say is, look, no matter whether you're on the enterprise level or the mid-range level now, nobody can afford for their systems to be down. The maintenance windows are shrinking for everybody, okay, and they're becoming, I'll call it non-existent. So, the intent here was to provide a system that provides 5 9 availability so that, you can do maintenance on this box, on the controller. You can basically take controller A down, controller B picks up all the workload, you download the firmware, you bring it back up, you take then controller B down and update the firmware. So the box is designed with full redundancy to begin to allow, even in the mid-range space, customers to have 0 downtime, okay, as much as possible. So that's the intent, high availability.
Very good. Is that I guess just last quick follow-up on that, is that how does that compare to some of the other systems that are out there? I mean, are there, as far as, is that pretty industry standard? So IBM is just keeping par with the industry in this regard, or is this?
There's like 9 nines and there's 5 nines. This is considered 5 nines is considered very high availability, but it's not considered what I'll call 0 downtime. Okay, which you're expecting in what I'll call maybe the DS8000 type of environment.
Sure, but I mean, still 5 nines is great. I mean, that's as far as I know, that's getting the 5 nines is a feat in and of itself. I just wasn't sure how the industry perceives that for this relative to other products. So that's kind of where the question is coming
And we're finding in the mid-range space, people, again, they don't have time for the systems to be down either anymore. So that's the intent, is to take
Absolutely.
the 5.9 availability even down to the mid-range level.
Very good. Well, all right, well, at that, I will cut everything off. I want to say, Louis, thank you very much for going through that presentation. Everyone should have my contact information, and if there are questions, you can definitely email those to me. But I want to say thanks a lot for going over the V7000 here, the IBM's world's most powerful mid-range storage system. We're going to sign off. Thanks for attending, and thanks, Louis, for presenting. Everyone, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louis.